sec pilot sitting in high sec at the moment, yeah?
Yes, so now it's saying broadcast video is now live. So that means that now it's being broadcast on my Google+. What you then do is you usually launch the Hangout from one of your pages that you are the admin of. And then it should actually post it like that. So when you get Crossing Zebras made as a Google Plus page, then when you host something like that, you can basically just launch it from that page, and then it should post it when it goes live.
Which is kind of cool. Which saves a bit of effort there, and we can easily add various plugins to the current blog just to auto-populate that across as well. Exactly,
and I think there's so much about Google Plus that's really been overlooked and not really tested yet. And well, it's basically because of dissemination of information. Like I stumbled upon some guys that had done a plugin for the Hangouts with all the things you need if you want to play pen and paper role-playing games using Google Hangouts, where you got everything with the pictures and the tiles for figures to show where people are located in combat, and all these tools and dice rollers and whatnot. There's so much being developed on this, and I'm pretty sure it's an open API.
Pretty sure it will be. Knowing Google, they tend to keep these things open because they see the benefits.
And the way that you then produce when you're doing things like we are now, when we're live, then the person that's hosting can just click through the pictures to choose what video feed to get on the live feed.
Yeah.
Let me show you the
just jumping into my Google Plus just now, actually.
I have to show you this. Seeing it live just makes it so epic. I don't know if you can already see it in the background. What's running on my captain's quarter screen.
That's brilliant.
And it's actually not that difficult to do. It took me a while before I actually got the tools to work, but once you got it working, it's really simple. And then I can just do this, and then the background is clear skies.
That's really cool.
And I also did the .vik conversion of that video with all the ships. So that's going to start playing when Clear Skies is done. I'm not sure exactly how it chooses what video to play, if it's alphabetically that it queues them, but everything in the cache is just played one after the other.
In some random order.
Yeah, and I think you can do the same with the pictures. They should also be in the cache. So basically, it would be rather simple for CCP to create some sort of minor tweaks to the system, so you can basically customize it. It's not exactly like having housing in other games, but it is getting there, right?
Well, I mean, when we did our last episode recording, I made the suggestion of having the ability to watch live streams in your captain's quarters. I think that aspect is something they need to really explore. Live streaming to your captain's quarters.
I think it is possible. It might be a little bit straining, because converting other formats to BIK seems to be a little bit hardcore. I think it took me.
If they were doing it the server side, then it wouldn't be an issue, would it?
No, that's true. So if that was added, then it would definitely be a possibility. And well, this is basically just Eve players again playing with the tools that was given us, right? It was the same with the MP3 player when people were using that as to play their own music in game. It's basically what's so unique about Eve, and it was funny because in one of the interviews that Sander did, I think it was it Riverini that was saying that the Eve players are not developers. I'd beg to fucking differ.
Yeah, well, the community says
Seriously,
otherwise. It has to be said.
the number of times that players have taken some feature and used it in a completely different way, or taken features and just made them 10 times better, it's amazing. I think Eve is one of the few games out there where you can definitely say that the player base is co-developers, and the third-party services just proves that. Everything from .land to well, the kill mail systems, that's all player made.
Yeah, well, the amount of third-party content outside of the client is just insane. I mean,
funny fact, it was just tweeted the other day. I think either you or Sandra actually commented on it. One of the null guys have created a statistics thing, Eve census.
Oh yeah.
Which is basically what we've been asking for ages.
Is that Poetic Stanzel? Is it not?
I can't remember who actually did it.
Is it not one of the bloggers? I'm sure it's one of the bloggers.
It's Poetic, really good.
Poetic Stanzel, yeah. He's doing. He's pulling statistics from all the kill words.
And when you consider it, right? Because when I was at the FanFest in 2009, I actually asked Dr. Ayo specifically for more data mining tools, and he basically promised that they were going to release more of the things like market history and things like that, and more statistics tools would be available. But nothing has happened, and that's what, 4 years. And then a player goes and creates exactly what we've been asking for. Well, not exactly, but at least the beginning of it, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, Poetic's basically been sort of mining all the information from kill boards, and he's collated it into a database, and is now basically using that to cross-reference and generate cool reports, which some of them are really bloody interesting, actually.
And this is what I keep seeing from players. They take all these things and they actually make them better, and that's also why I've been trying to promote this idea about getting a sort of a voluntary co-developer group created to actually support both CCP and the CSM to play with these ideas. There's so many ideas are lost in features and ideas forums. And not being considered, and it's just sad because some of them might actually be exactly what CCP would be looking for and what the players would really like.
Well, exactly, and well, it'd be interesting to see actually how this, because they are talking about this new Crest API thing, aren't they?
Yeah, and this is also something that's been underway for quite a while, and I just think that right now the playing field is not really level. You really need some powerful third-party coders to do things like what Eve Census does, right?
Yeah.
Without a more open approach from CCP, then it's really the extreme tech savvy that gets access to this.
Yeah, well, exactly, and it's not for the faint of hearted. I can't imagine how many hours of development time were put into things like the Eve Census. I mean.
And it's the same thing with the people that I kind of represent, the market discussion group and the financial interested people. The number of things that they have tried to get off the ground, everything from share system and stock options and IPO launches and bonds and all these things. It's all being done without any support from the actual in-game client, and that makes it pretty heavy, right? Because it opens it up to scams, and it's going to be so much trust-based. Of course, it's still interesting to play with. It's just then it's going to be a very small minority that wants to actually take the time and do things like that. And I was suggesting the other day that I think CCP should, instead of doing all these things about Eve history, what they really should do is consider putting some man hours into supporting people like yourself and making sure that there's a pretty nice website interface to find all these metagame services and make sure that they are discontinued or shows as inactive if, say, a podcaster is on an Eve break.
Yeah. Well, I must admit that when we started recording even a year ago, things were very, very hard work, to be honest. But over the course of the last year of our broadcasts, we seem to be finding information to these things an awful lot easier. Obviously, CCP have taken an interest, which makes those things a lot easier to come by. But yeah,
in the fact that the devs have been so good at actually engaging in the social media is really a positive thing, and it's something that's been missing for a long time, in my opinion.
well, we've watched over the course of the last year and seen how things have developed over the last year, and it's definitely something that's improved hugely over this last 12 months. I don't know, as I said, how much of that is really to do with the fact that we've become more prominent in the arena, as it were. But yeah, it's definitely more obvious that CCP are actively engaging in the community.
I think it's now speaking from experience with how they were testing this out in the very early beginnings. Back in 2003, 2004, the number of developers and the number of players was so low, so you had more intimacy and more access to CCP, and this just feels a little bit like a revival of that by using the social media tools, and it's really amazing to see how responsive CCP has become and how engaged and productive the CSM has actually become. I know that some will say that it's a waste and you can come up with all manner of criticism, but comparing it to how it has worked in the past, it's really good now, and it's very proactive, and it's some very competent people that's been on it, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean it is definitely a leap ahead of where it was when I remembered. But I have never heard of a game like Eve whereby the community has so much access to the developers. I can't
really
think of anything like it.
The term stakeholder that's being thrown around a lot, and especially in the minutes, it's not just fluff. It's really fact, and it just shows more and more as time progresses that this is a co-development project between the players and CCP, and I think that's really unique. It doesn't exist in other games at all.
Well, no, exactly, and it shows. It's interesting to see how much of the player base actually has an interest in it, because they say that, you know, the CSM, for example, they reckon something like 15 to 20% of the player base will vote in the CSM. So it doesn't sound like an awful lot, but I mean, 1/5 of the player base is actively trying to influence how the game progresses, really.
Yeah,
that's significant.
And of course, there's going to be a huge body of people that are not really engaged or interested in, say, the politics. But how is that different than the real world?
Well, that's exactly.
It's exactly the same. People have a political apathy, but compared to the real world, I would even say that the Eve players are more engaged politically and proactively.
There's definitely an argument for that. Yeah, I would say so. And they're certainly more vocal about it.
And now I know this might sound a little bit jokingly, but a game where someone actually sits down and writes, I think it was 96 pages of development ideas only for planetary interaction.
Yeah, 96 pages.
That's
somebody,
a small book.
Somebody had to read all that.
Of course, CCP would never read something like that, and this is also why I think it would be so vital if CCP was better at maybe actively promoting or at least supporting the fact that people do these things. It might not make it into the game, but the fact that there's some sort of response and some sort of dialogue between the CCP and the players would really improve the game, I think.
Yeah, well, anything that engages them, it's got to be good.
So, and I think the fact that we're doing this now and basically pushing the limit of what we would like Eve to become and envision is possible, that's just part of the process, really. And if we're going to get 10 more years, we're going to have to be much more engaged, because how will you take something that Eve is now and make it bigger and more complex without the participation of the players?
Well, yeah, it's impossible. It
So,
is impossible. But I mean, yeah, I mean, Eve's one of those games, isn't it? People seem to always come back to it, and very few people ever leave.
and I think Dr. Ayer gave the stats on that. If players stay in Eve for more than 6 months, they actually keep coming back.
That sounds about right. If you can get over the 6 month of initial learning curve just to be competent enough to fly something decent, then yeah, people will come back, because it's like, well, do you know what? I'm not that far away from the next thing.
And it's I think what keeps bringing people back is the social aspects, the interaction with people, the whole metagame thing, because there's of course a lot of interesting things that you can do inside the client, but what really sets Eve apart from other games is the fact that, well, social relationships don't just matter, they matter a lot, because every single player has an influence on the game.
Well, without a doubt,
And,
yeah.
and you cannot say that for any other game. You can do raid bosses in World of Warcraft every single day, and it's not going to change a single thing in the world.
No, that's it.
But if you just declare war against one little 5-man corp, that's already caused some sort of huge ecological and economical influence in the game.
Yeah, everything. It's one of the founding factors of the Goon Swarm, isn't it? That every player counts and every action has a consequence, and so on and so forth. It's Eve is very unique in that regard.
And the big alliances and organizations that's developed in Eve is just amazing history, and it's incredible to see how professional it is.
Yeah, well, I think it's formed out of necessity in a game like Eve, though, isn't it? Such a cutthroat. It mirrors real life so much that you have to have your mega corporations, I suppose, don't you?
But it's just so weird that if you consider something like Goons, which is the latest phenomenon, right? The way that it's managed, the tools, the complexities, the policies, the fact that there was primaries internally in Goons for the CSM.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's quite insane when you really think about it. That corporations within Eve are so organised that they have mini elections before the elections that CCP are creating.
And I think if you take it to the next level, this is something that I've been talking to friends, and I've also been doing video blogs about it. Some of the skill sets that players pick up in Eve, I don't think most of them really have a clue as to how real it actually is.
Well, no, exactly. I mean, some of the interesting characters in game do what they do in game as a profession.
Many of them do, and many of the people that start a career in Eve that doesn't resemble anything they do in real life actually gain skill sets that match real life equivalents, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because it would not shock me if someone from the CSM ended up actually doing real life politics.
Well, there has been. I mean, was what's his name? The guy that, oh goodness sakes, Vile Rat. He was involved in real world politics.
He was working in
He was a security officer in an embassy, IT
Yeah,
security or something, wasn't
yeah. It was it the Egypt thing?
he? I think it was Egypt. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty well. It was one of the embassy. I think it was Egypt. That's what strikes me in the head. Yeah, I'm sure it's Egypt.
and now I have uh, seen quite a few people go from Eve markets and actually go out and do similar things in real markets. The latest is one of the vocal people on the MD VV, who's actually now trading in real life and supporting his life through real market trading, because it's not just like Eve; it's exactly like Eve.
It's exactly like Eve. Yeah,
and
it's
and, and a lot of discussions about what's called technical analysis, where you basically learn how to surf the market graph, and actually make money of the margins. So these things are just something that we've all grown familiar with if we've been around for a long time. And as I was pointing out, listening to the interviews that Sander did was so close to what you would expect from a professional BBC hard talk journalist.
well, yeah. I mean, like as I mentioned in the chat earlier on, it is funny to listen to him actually doing that to other people, but it's just what he does. He's just like that, and he does other podcasts as well. You see, so it's something he's fairly proficient at, is talking.
And it's just so funny to see these things develop in a virtual environment. Eve is becoming more and more like a strange simulator of real life than an actual game.
Yeah.
And I think that the more they progress in that direction by removing the influence of any NPC activity and basically just letting it be almost a 100% sandbox, that's just going to become even more relevant.
Well, yeah. The only boundaries that you have within Eve that have to be almost met with NPCs and stuff are pretty much the production of materials. I mean, that's the only thing. That's the only thing they have to keep control of to control them, keep the economy on track, really.
Yeah, and that's really about destruction, right?
Yeah.
Industrialism and destruction, and this is something that's going to kind of balance itself. I think the only real challenge is to make sure that the sinks and faucets are balanced. So you could say that they turn down the ISK faucet to actually start making it less than the current cost, so cost starts going down.
Mm-hmm.
Basically rebalancing the pricing, because I know that some comments have been made that there's not an inflation problem in Eve, but there is in if you start counting personal assets into your net asset value.
Well, yeah, I mean,
then there definitely is.
The amount of liquid ISK in game is just.
Yeah, but the assets is actually worse. The amount of passive assets in people's hangars and whatnot is just even more crazy, because people just leave it there or speculate, and
forget about it. Yeah, I only need to look at my asset list to realise how bad a situation it must be, because mine is ever growing and ever more spread out all over the place and ever less likely to ever be consolidated somewhere and used.
Yeah, I remember back in the day when I did a lot of regional trading. I had 4 regions where had stuff on almost every single station.
Yeah,
piles and piles of stuff, and I had no idea how to shift it. And I think it was when I came back in 07, I think I started just fire sale and deleting stuff, simply to cut down on the asset list, because it was stupid.
Just try and catch it. Yeah.
When I opened the map, everything was just red with my assets. So
yeah,
I think
I think I'm much the same, to be fair. I'm not probably not quite as bad as that, because I've never really taken trading as an activity. But Yeah, definitely have a lot of stuff everywhere.
And yeah, you can't control that sort of stuff.
No,
Really, it
absolutely not.
becomes impossible. You're never going to get around to that many systems. Your ant colony algorithm is not going to help you.
No, well, that's it. That's it.
So
God, I'm actually looking at the map just now to look at my assets dotted all over the place, and yeah, it's uh, it's quite a lot of stuff all over the place. Uh, yeah. Oh well.
I think it was Tornsol, one of the very old Eve players, that actually said that what made him play Eve, or what really caught him, was when he opened the map the first time. And I think it's a little bit sad that they haven't done much more in making the map an actual statistic tool.
The possibilities that are in the map already are ridiculous. I mean, the things you can find out just by using the map, but it's just such an awkward tool to use sensibly.
Yeah, it's very it's not very user friendly, and I think what's been missing is what we were talking about, Eve sensors. I think information like that should become available in the map, but maybe with a chronological fog of war, so you had only data that was a week or older.
Yeah, that would work.
Because things like demographics and population movements, and well, of course, the sovereignty map and things like that, that's really what gives you the information that you need to play on.
Well, yeah.
And as it is now, a lot of these tools have to be reached outside of the client, and then I think that's really sad, because again, to have a level playing field, it needs to be available in some sense also in game, even though there might be better third-party player created things outside.
Yeah, well, the problem is, again, development time, isn't it? And if they were to implement it, then they would want to reinvent the wheel and make sure it's all singing, all dancing, because they'd have to beat the third-party developers in their own heads. I think
Yeah,
there's a
but they
certain
don't.
stubbornness among developers like that, isn't there?
Yeah, but they don't really need to beat the third party developers, right? They just need to open up access to some of this information, so it becomes available for the third party to just start creating it and creating features. And I'm pretty sure that a professional development house like CCP can then take that and make it into something just like they did with the kill mails, right?
Well, you'd like to think so, definitely.
And it would cut down on development time a lot, because they're basically utilizing the players as
You're crowdsourcing.
Yeah,
You're
they're
crowdsourcing development.
crowdsourcing it basically, right? You get a working beta, and then they just need to plug in the functionality that they like.
Yeah. It's one of those things. As a developer, I mean, I've done development myself, and I must admit that I think it's quite a common theme for developers to be very awkward about opening their work to other people. They don't like the idea of other people messing with their baby, as it were.
But then we get back to the stakeholder thing, right?
No, absolutely, and things like this have improved massively anyway.
And whose baby is it?
No, I absolutely agree. But there's a certain pride in this, that, if I'm looking at a third party who's created a tool, yeah, cool. I don't want to copy that tool or implement that tool. It's already been done.
And I'm pretty sure that if you look at the development of CCP as a company, right, there are more players that's had stakes in this game longer than the current developer crew.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, people that have been there from the beginning probably I don't know if there are any of the original development team there. There can't be many of them.
Well, most of them are still there in some sense, especially the main ones, Hilma and Torfi and those guys. They're all still there. So they've just been pushed up into the management roles, yeah. So they don't really have much hands-on anymore, I think. But
So
it's just funny that the company have grown that much, and that there are so many players that's actually had a stake in it for longer and been part of developing it into what it is today.
yeah.
Things like Eve files and all the services that Kribber's got, and the .land maps and all these things, they're all third-party things that have a longer track record than a lot of the current team in CCP.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kribber's a very unique individual. It has to be said when it comes to the development more third-party stuff. The things he must invest a hell of a lot of his own personal money or company assets or something into that.
And it's a vital part of Eve. Like things like the forum search is vital to many activities in Eve, like checking for alts and background searches, which is not just relevant to the null entities. It's also extremely relevant to people like the industrialists and in the financial aspect, right? If you want to do anything that's got trust issues, you need something like that to make sure that you can data mine and figure out who someone is, right?
Well, there is no other way unless you want to set up your own forum search, which seems a little bit insane.
And especially because, I don't know how much information CCP actually got on the inside, how much history they've actually recorded, but the forums and the old forums and forum searches and things like that, and of course Web Archive, that's where all the unwritten Eve story is.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has not really been told yet. I do hope that new website thing might help bring some more of the player stories to the surface, because so many things that people don't know about is really what makes Eve a special game, right?
Well, it'll be very interesting to see how they promote and how they develop that timeline feature in moving forward, really.
I'm waiting for the first ghost-written, semi-professional biography of an Eve character.
I'm sure it'll arrive at some point. Definitely.
It's most definitely going to, because the number of players that's been playing for almost all the 10 years is really a lot larger than most people think.
Oh well, I mean, I know I've got at least two in the same core as me that have been here since the very beginning, or certainly within the first few months of the game launching.
And that's why it's so funny when the limiting factor on that website is like 5,000 words or something like that.
Yeah, 5,000 words. Yeah, 5,000 words isn't enough for a year's worth of activity in my head.
There's people that's got 10 years, and this is funny because the interviews that my girlfriend did with some of the old people that I know, and the people that we then contacted, one of the questions were, what's your one defining moment in Eve? And every single one of them had to say, well, there's not just one, but these are the highlights.
Yeah, well, that's it. God, I don't think I could narrow it down to one. I don't think I could narrow it down to three. And I've only been playing the game.
It's difficult because it's a progressive thing. It just escalates, and one event just leads to another, and it just becomes this snowball thing, and you do get an Eve life, really.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've only been playing the game 4 years now. My God, 4 years. 4 years. I didn't realize it had been so long until just now. But yeah, I mean, in 4 years, Jesus, that's a long time.
And it's funny because now that new CSM candidate, Ari, talks a lot about the new player experience. And I would actually like to try to point out that there's also something that needs to be done regarding the old player experience, because we have a game where people are getting families and kids, and the kids grow up, and all this is happening while they are still engaged in Eve to some degree,
I know of Eve families now. I actually in the same core as I play, we have a guy who's been playing almost since the beginning, and he has now indoctrinated his daughter into playing with us as well.
Yeah, exactly. And there's now a new generation, literally, of Eve players that are starting out in the Eve experience. And
Yeah.
how do you talk about only new player experience when you basically have to make sure that the Eve existence is persistent?
Well, yeah. It's yeah. There's an awful lot of ground to cover there as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and I think now I've been trying to promote the fact that they should really consider doing some sort of legacy account thing where any account that's more than 10 years old is actually not doesn't need plexing or anything. They're basically free, but they can't be traded.
That would be kind of cool. That would be a nice touch.
Because these people will most likely just get more accounts if they actively play.
Well, I mean, I can't think of any of the older players that have less than 3 or 4 accounts.
So it's not really a loss. What it is an acknowledgement of the fact that anyone that's actually invested 10 years should be considered a co-owner or an extreme stakeholder, and they should not be forced to quit just because they have family issues, girlfriend aggro, or deaths in the family. It's these things that I don't think CCP has actually realized fully yet, that's something they need to consider with their player base.
Well, 10 years is insane, actually, when you think about it.
It's a decade. My
Decades.
kids grew up. My oldest is 16 now, right?
Yeah,
And
10 years.
I was playing Eve before I got my son. It's crazy, and he's 10.
Yeah, well, that's it. Your son is now coming of the age that he'd be able to at least jump in a mining ship and earn you some ISK.
Exactly. So if we could promote that planetary interaction became more like Farmville, right? I would actually be able to utilize my kids.
Well, it's slave labor, but it's acceptable, isn't it?
So that would mean that my kids would be farming planets and mining, and I would be managing.
Yeah, well, that's it. Just you just sit there and point. Right, I want that roid. Get it now.
The only issue would be the whole discussion about allowance in ISK and how much ISK to real life money, and yeah, that's going to create a whole RMT like aspect. So.
Well, definitely. I'm just speaking to Xander's just literally come on Skype and he's tapping away to me. We're discussing FanFest.
Oh yeah, I would so love to go. I can't really afford it this year. I am hoping to go next year though, and I am considering if I might be running for CSM next time, unless the field just goes crazy insane with competent people. So.
It's not likely. Don't expect that too soon. To be fair.
I'm not so sure. I think in a small way, some of the things like what you've been doing is going to promote the idea of actually running, even for people that might not have a whole nullsec alliance behind them.
Well, the thing is, right? The argument that Xander's been pushing, and I'm 100% behind him on this, is that if CCP could get every player invested in the CSM, then nullsec blocks matter nothing. It means nothing.
Well, it is a back and forth discussion. Well, from what I know of most null players, they all have at least 1 or 2 accounts that are active in high sec. So the skewing of numbers might not be as bad as some people think.
Yeah, possibly not, but you can bet that nullsec players with multiple accounts, for the most part, especially if you... How many accounts do you run at the moment?
I am very low. I only run 2.
I only run 2 as well. But what I did notice is that literally when I went to vote, when you when I logged into my second account, my votes had already been in the same order and ready to just submit again.
Nice.
So I literally only had to select the people I wanted to vote for once, and then I just had to log into the second account and click submit, and it was the same again. It required no extra effort, and I would suspect that most people that are voting would probably vote the same people for all their accounts.
I think one of the things that also is kind of relevant to mention, and I do think that Sander pointed it out too, and it was also on the Mitani, is the fact that competence in regards to CSM is also usually linked to experience, and that means that there's a big chance that they might be affiliated with some sort of null entity.
Well, you would expect so. I mean, I am making a leap here, but I would suggest that most of the older players in the game would be invested in nullsec predominantly.
Yeah, and I think the only exception to that rule is the players that have just got so burned out by the state of things that they don't care about null and have left it, or that they never really went there because, well, to be honest, null mechanics have been a little bit, well, shoot fest frenzy biased in my opinion.
Probably fair point.
And I think it's very sad. And I think it's because people like shooting shit, and that's fun. But it just became too much about that and only about warfare in null, and that then what's sovereignty really about? It's just an honorary thing, right? If there's no population actively participating in the dealings out there except for shooting things and setting up AFK moon pool mining, then there's no activity. It's just combat. The fact that they need to import so much is just proof of that.
Well, there is some serious holes in the current mechanics in the game that make that that just make that whole situation worse.
And this is because of well, it's because of two things, if I'm not mistaken. It's that CCP has never really taken the final steps in letting the mechanics be totally player based and totally free. I wrote a little piece recently making fun of it and comparing it to communism, because if you look at some of the NPC functionalities, they are basically destroying any market competition.
Yeah.
It's like watching queues in shops in Russia, right? That's basically what you got with the research queues, and that problem has been in there since day one, and they have not really dared take that step and saying, well, this needs to be a dynamic priced system.
Well, yeah, there are some aspects of it, yeah.
You've had these fixed-priced, planned economy-like things where NPCs are basically disrupting the natural flow of an economy.
Yeah, because they're just dumping things at a set value and high volume.
And that means that it's actually going to be counter to PvP, because PvP is not just shooting things, it's also the other aspect, which is actually competition in the market, and it's about collaboration, right?
Yeah.
So I think until they realize that if they leave that aspect, and if they keep saying that the benefit of null is a nice, easy AFK income, then they're never going to change anything. It's going to stay the way it is.
Yeah, well, it's one of the big arguments about the whole technetium system, isn't it? I mean, the whole moon mining. You're just earning ISK passively, and all you have to do is dump that onto the market every month or two.
And it's the same with the fact that the soft system is also based on combat and not activity, as we mentioned earlier, that it should really be considered that it's more like high sec, where you have.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to say the Sov system's based on combat. To be honest with you, it's about grinding structures. That's all it's about.
Yeah, and it should really be about who is on the planets, who has access to the moons, who's got posses at the moons, and who owns and have anchored the stations.
Well, yeah.
And it's funny because in Empire, you will have a Galente sovereignty system, and then you will have Caldari corporations in it.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Because the sovereignty is not related directly to who can actually have entities there.
No, they were talking about this fairly recently, so they were hinting that they were going to do something with the way that Sov even in high sec works, make it much more interactive.
I hope they make a Sov system that's more like Empire, and I hope that they promote the existence of more player-owned stations, because nullsec would really be interesting if it actually got populated with people that were moving around like they do in high sec.
Well, there are so many mechanics they could introduce to make it interesting. I mean, you could effectively end up with a private Concord or something along those lines.
Yeah, and well, what I would like to see first is that instead of all these strategic units that you have to kill, why not just use the activity, saying that it's who's actually got control of the current customs offices, who's got control of the posses, and who's got control of the stations.
Yes, it's something like the incursion system.
Yeah,
where the control is beaten from the other side effectively by them incurring massive losses compared to the attackers or whatever. And
then link it into the standing system in some way, so you can actually have neutral bodies in the subholder space. So it doesn't actually. You can have a pause, and if it's if there's neutral standing towards you, it's not going to actually affect the tug of war system of the incursion.
Well, that would work. That would work quite impressively, actually.
And then it would still be grindfest, because if you wanted to change the sub, you would have to actually attack the custom officers and the posses and the stations in the system that was negative standing towards you, and thus causing any change in sovereignty.
Yeah. I think if they're going to have structure grinding in that sense, then they have to make it much more sensible. I mean, the current incarnation of structure grinding is what somebody worked out the maths behind it. It's obscene, and it can be easily reset at any point.
Yeah, I think this is also such an important aspect of EVE, the cost of war machine versus industrial machines. They really should tweak it so it's cheaper to build posses, to have industrial ships, because if they are cheaper, they reduce the aversion of risk. Then you could make it easier to kill them. But
you would then arguably have to adjust the reward that you're getting from these things.
Not so much. If the Hulk was, let's say, a quarter of the price, right? Losing it would not be such a huge issue. Then it would make sense to make it easier to kill. The fact that they boosted it, right? The fact that they boosted it so it's now almost impossible to kill. How many is it? 15 ships you need to gank in high sec?
To gank it, it's something like 15. Yeah, it's significantly more than it was. Let's put it that way.
Which is ridiculous. It should be exactly the opposite. They should be easier to kill, but then they should be easier to replace.
Yeah, well, that certainly generates more destruction.
And it makes no sense that people will aggress against a war target and not an industrial target. The industrial targets are the ones you want to take down. So posses should be able to be destroyed very easily, but relatively easy to get back up. So,
well, yeah.
So you would go for the industrial aspects, the supportive lines of a sovereignty holder, before you started actually engaging the enemy, right?
Yeah. There's definitely some merits in it. It's difficult really to work out how that would balance out. I mean, it's sensible. What you're saying is not outside the realms of sense. It's just it'd be a very delicate balancing act, because if you're making industrialists effectively more gankable, then they're more prone to being ganked, which means that you're going to push prices up because they're more vulnerable. But then on the other side, if you're making them cheaper to produce them, they're costing less minerals to be produced, and more people are going to be taking risks with them. So production on that end goes up.
And the interesting aspect is that from a financial perspective, that means that because you need to replace a lot of industrial tools, then a lot of effort would be spent on building industrial tools. That means that less supply would go to the war machine. That means that the cost of the war machine would go up.
Yeah, yeah, arguably so. But does
So
that tip the balance too far in the industrial's advantage?
it doesn't it doesn't really balance towards the industrials per se. It should even out. The whole point is that the fact that it's uh, almost the same whether you're trying to gank a warship or a mining ship makes no sense.
Yeah, it's insane. That is ridiculous, and it is broken. I definitely agree they've gone too far with that. But
If freighters were easier to gank, if haulers were easier to gank, if mining ships were easier to gank, if posses were easier to gank, then you would get the destruction where it actually belongs. That would then cause a war, right? Because the war machine is dependent on that industrialism, right?
yeah,
So
no,
you would get meaningful wars instead of meaningless wars.
but you'd be introducing the issue of ridiculously unbalanced kills. Something of a destroyer class, and this is the reason they did the rebalancing in the first place, I suppose. Something in a destroyer class should not be able to take out something 10, 20 times its size within 2 or 3 cycles of a weapon.
No,
Which
but
is
a
effectively what's
frigate should
happening.
be able to basically gank a hauler or even a smaller mining ship, ideally.
Well, yeah, I mean, something that size, yeah, understandably. But when you're talking about like a Hulk, I mean, a Hulk is quite a big ship. I mean, I don't know exactly what hull class a Hulk would be, where it would fall into, but I mean, it's not a small ship by any stretch of the imagination.
Size-wise, I think it's about the same as a battleship, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think. Well, it must be around about that, isn't it? What, 509 meters axis it's saying in game, and let's go for Raven, good old Raven. What's a Raven in size? It's
The
what?
ship sizes are actually playing in the background right now.
Are they? So yeah, a Raven's 800. So you're just about the size of a Raven
Yeah.
for a Hulk, which is not a kick in the arse off of battleship size anyway. So for a destroyer or two to be able to gank that in 2 or 3 cycles of a weapon seems a little bit obscene. But I think they have probably tipped it a little bit too far.
I think the point is that if you got something like that running, then instead of having one Hulk, people would just have five Hulks, one in each location, and they would move around according to the availability or the competition of the mining activity. And
I
the
think
same
I,
with
I
other
think you'd have to
industrials.
be very. I think you'd have to be very careful with that aspect. I mean, the high sec. The last thing you want is a playground in high sec whereby it's too easy for people to go around it completely safe. But equally, you don't want it so ridiculously easy to gank everything that's, I can go out my 3 million fitted ship and gank things with impunity, knowing that, I'm losing 3 million compared to their 50 to 100 million ship every time.
Of course not. I'm not saying that I want a lot of Care Bear tears. I'm just saying
I
that
do. I love Care Tears.
I'm basically just saying that the scale that's needed to destroy something is not balanced anymore.
No, it is completely screwed up since they started messing around with these things. But
I would rather have some sort of system to make sure that people that then have committed these crimes could not actually enter systems.
that would be interesting.
Because if you are a known criminal and if you have ganked like that, then you shouldn't be allowed into the system.
Or even some sort of security status metric whereby you couldn't enter a system with a certain security status.
Yes,
So
and
yeah,
without workarounds, right? So basically, if you are in a ship, in a system, and you have extremely bad standing, you should just be aggressed against immediately by Concord instead of the way it is now.
that would be a cool mechanic. I could see that working, and that obviously means then, unless you're in a pod, obviously, that would mean you'd have to go to some kind of low sec, null sec
Yeah,
to
exactly. So
get
it would also
your
treat
stats up.
nullsec, right?
Yeah,
It might make nullsec a meaningful place for the low standing characters, right? So you would know that when you are down there, then there's going to be pirates, right?
the only problem I would see with that, and that is the new player that goes and ends up with a really low security status and isn't supported by a corporation or has knowledge of corporations that would get them into any sort of position to rat that back up. They would need to do something to.
Yeah, and that's where they just need to balance something that's linked directly to the loyalty point system, right? Because high-sec Care Bears are mission runners, right? So mission runners create something that can be gotten from the LP store. Those items would then be used to get standing back up, and then the balance would be equal. The number of LP that you would grind, right, and sell to the pirate that then wants his status back up should just be balanced so the cost is on the high sec side, right?
That would,
So
yeah,
basically, to replace his lost Hulk, let's say we go to the quarter of the value, so about 40-50 million, right?
yeah, give or take, yeah.
Then the amount of time that he would need to get LP that he would then sell to you, so you could hand them in to clear your standing, would be in the benefit of the miner or the mission runner. So he would basically sell you the tags to reset your value, and you would pay him something equivalent to 75 million, right?
Got you. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Then it balances out. Then you wouldn't need all this Care Bear Protection Act, which we've basically been living with. Because it would
Well,
be balanced naturally.
certainly heard nothing but whinging about for the last goodness knows how long. Let's create a green zone where nothing can be aggressed, which is ridiculous.
And with that, then there would be more destruction because there would be more people that were able to actually get the standing back up, go out and kill some new targets. And these targets would then have already gotten the value to replace it either by mining or by missioning to sell the LP tags to the people that's actually been ganking them.
Yeah.
It's just that there's been a lack of lateral integration from CCP, I think, where they haven't really thought about how important small changes or small tweaks are and how it basically becomes a life cycle.
There's definitely a lot of possibilities, isn't there? I mean, to improve it. It's just one of the difficult things is, CCP aren't likely to discuss what they're going to do until it's become common knowledge, and that's just the way that they seem to operate in these things. The suggestions that we make are possibly.
Of course, they want to keep the nice changes to themselves. So there's some excitement and some hype around new expansions. But I'm more talking about these small things that are easy to change or integrate. If you go to a non-playing station and you look at all the features that are dead, you'd be amazed.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Features that were supposed to be active but never got implemented.
Simply because, yeah.
simply because they didn't dare change it. Like up until about 2009, the office rent didn't change. It hardly changed at all, right? And then they tweaked it so the more people were actually using the stations, the faster it actually went up. So
Yeah.
that's why you got these rental fees of, I think it's up in the 100 millions now
Well, you should
each
include them
month
there, yeah.
in Jita. And this is something they should consider in all the NPC facilities.
There was an argument recently about something similar, and I'm trying to remember what the hell it was.
They could add that mechanic to research slots, and you would.
That's actually what it was. The conversation was about was research slots, and there was somebody mentioned something about creating new research slots if all the slots were full for a month and stuff like that. So if you filled a station's build slots for a month, then at the end of that month, more build slots were added, but the cost escalated.
Yeah, I put up a suggestion along those lines.
Was it you?
It might have been mine because
Yeah, it might have been.
I've always wanted to remove NPCs entirely. I want them out. I want all the slots that are available at the station to be directly linked to a POS. That's
Okay.
what I really want. But alternatively, to keep some sort of NPC system running, I would like to see the fact that prices move with activity, and so does the number of slots. So you could end up having 100 building slots in Jita, but the cost would be
Well, easily.
crazy. So people would actually need to sit down and calculate, is this really profitable anymore? And then they would start balancing it out and vacating the slots, and they would not build things that make no sense to build.
It'd be an interesting take to see how that affected the market.
Oh, it would really balance it, and it would create a lot of new market opportunities, because then suddenly the logistic aspect became much more interesting, because people would start moving their production process to places where the costs were lower and where all the benefits were better, and that means that they're going to move and take the profit from that. So they're basically going to be able to take some of the profit from the big market hubs and move it out.
But I mean, increasing the number of build slots, even if it does increase the cost, is going to it's going to increase production at Jita.
Yeah, but that doesn't really matter. It's fine that production of things that still have huge profit margins stay in Jita. That makes perfect sense. It's just that all the other stuff, all the supportive stuff, should move out.
True.
Because then the margins would be non-existent, and then it would only be reached if you moved out. So basically, you would say that Tech 1 production would move out of Jita, and then...
But I don't want to gank a freighter full of T1 crap.
No. But the benefit from building T2 off hub would also increase.
Yeah, true.
So you would still ship Tech 2 into Jita, because you would have a lot better margin on it.
It would be an interesting one to see how it panned out, and it's definitely an interesting idea. And I read it and I thought, I don't know an awful lot about manufacturing. It's not something I've ever done in game, but I mean, I do know enough about it to understand the concept behind build slots and stuff like that. And I think it'd be a very interesting mechanic to see how it panned out. I do think though it'd be met with quite a lot of resistance.
Yeah, but so did the office rental thing.
Well, yeah, I suppose
people have gotten used to it, because before that got introduced, people were just plugging offices everywhere, and they didn't care. They would just, anywhere where they had any activity at all, they would just get an office slot too, which makes no sense. That's why they were plugged everywhere. And now you can get offices almost everywhere, because there's always 2 or 3 slots available.
Yeah, well, for the most part, unless it's Jita.
And the only thing that's really needed now, in my personal opinion, would be a CCP statistics to show prices on rental, because you can't see it. So you can't really figure out where you want to move. You have to go and research every single system, figure out how many slots are available and what the cost is.
Yeah.
Real
But
estate
you
should
don't
be
know how to
something
do
that you can see, right?
it. It would be well, I think there is an awful lot of holes in those mechanics, though. I think they've been implemented yeah, as a quick fix, and nothing really followed up afterwards.
Yeah, and I know this sounds like a bit of it, but I was opposing that on the CSM when it was discussed the first time around that the research slots were plugged everywhere, and everyone just wanted to increase the number of slots. And I kept saying that's not going to solve the problem. And they
Well,
still just increased the slots, and they did that twice, if I'm not mistaken. Even though plenty of people had been discussing and pointing out the fact that this is not going to solve it. The only
yeah,
thing that will solve it is a dynamic price system. You need to get some sort of price finding. You need to create a system that makes people want to sit down, do the math, figure out is this actually profitable.
well, welcome to spreadsheets online.
And yeah, and this would also create potentially new player services, third-party services, where, well, like you must be using or have used the DDAF sheet, his huge Excel sheet that calculates everything when you're doing production and invention and all these things, and then rent would also be a factor, right?
Yeah.
It's just these small tweaks that I would like to see change, and similar to something as fundamental as player billing, that you've got bills, but I can't bill another player.
I think that's an interesting idea as well. I, I'm not sure how that would work. You'd have to have some form of control, surely. Otherwise,
You
what
send
would
a
you?
bill, the bill
Yeah,
gets into your wallet the same as the NPC bills, and then the person that you've billed have sends an acknowledgement, and you receive that as an email, and it shows as green or with a mark showing that it's been acknowledged by the player, and then it's still outstanding, right?
yeah.
And then there's a time frame, and if it goes beyond that, then you consider it a default, and when it defaults, it starts collecting interest. And when you see that the interest collected or stacked has reached a certain point, you consider that an offensive action, and then you maybe take the equivalent loss and use it for a bounty or a kill contract or for a war.
But if you're able to issue player bills, uh, if I were to issue someone with a bill, what's the control to stop me doing that to anybody? On what basis can I issue a bill to someone?
Same as you can give money.
So for any reason, this in fact could be used quite easily as a griefing tactic to pretty much anybody.
Yeah, but I think the important aspect would be to have some sort of warning thing when bills arrive the first time, saying this is a billing system, you can disable it, and then you just ignore every bill.
Okay.
It's more to give a service to corporations that need services like this or functions like this.
I can see its purpose. What I'm trying to drill into, the idea itself, it may well be it's completely sound. I just don't understand, how you would control that. If I was to sit in a new system and just sit and issue bills to people.
I think I'm pointing out that a billing system would be way more useful for metagame and for EVE players PvP than the current bounty system.
It would certainly be a different way of approaching it. I don't know if I necessarily agree it would be a better system. The
Well,
idea of
it
being
would
able
serve
to.
a more important purpose, because billing is something we all know, and it's something that we can intuitively approach and use for services and functions just like we do in real life. The fact that we don't have that in EVE is a huge oversight.
Arguably we do though, in the contract system, don't we?
In part, but it's not really a bill, right?
No, agreed.
It's not like you can have an outstanding bill. It's not like you can have liabilities.
So, I mean, what you could probably do and potentially do is amend the contract system to accrue interest over a period of time or whatever else.
It's the same as having the ability to create bills that repeat, right?
Yeah,
Would make it possible to make an easy rental system, and it would make it extremely easy to make a salary system, because
yeah.
then you just add them to auto accept until they change.
So, I mean, yeah. So, I think essentially what you're saying is a new contract type almost.
Yeah, but it's very different from a contract because it's an actually it's an actual system for bills
Yeah.
where um, if a player is in a corp and they agree on a salary with the corporation, then issuing that as a bill that repeats, right,
Hmm.
permanently, well, or for 12 months, regarding what type of contract you come up with regarding hiring them.
Yeah.
Then the point is that the manager can easily just set that as auto pay.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And then a corporation that is very industrially heavy, right, would then have these things working. And then on an alliance level, it would be very easy for CCP to put in a taxation system.
Yeah.
So you had income tax suddenly, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh dear God, it's already like another job. I don't know if I want to pay more tax for my job.
No, but it would give the income to the alliance level
Yeah.
from something that makes sense instead of technetium wounds.
No. Well, absolutely. It definitely helps the bottom up approach, but
It's
yeah.
necessary for the bottom-up approach because then taxation would start making sense, and ideally you would even put it on some sort of publicly visible financial statement or report. Most of the big bodies already do financial reports, and the fact that you might be able to see some of these informations would also play part of evaluating a corporation or an alliance, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, so certainly seen corporations doing similar sort of tax reports and stuff before.
And right now we are
Evaluate
just
that would be.
forced to use so many third-party tools, which is all fine and it's very useful. The problem is that if it's not visible in game, then you have no chance of using it for anything, except
Yeah.
once you start extremely using the metagame, right? The small fact that I keep joking about is we have the character sheets and they created EveGate, but I cannot go to the EveGate entry of a character from inside the client.
Yeah, there's a big disconnect between the two aspects.
That's
But I
so
mean,
stupid. And
eh,
why doesn't it also log me in on that character? So
the,
if I'm on the forums, it logs me in on that character and it just posts as that character.
yeah, and the other aspect as well. I mean, yeah, just to roll back to the CSM voting stuff. I mean, I don't even think that stuff worked in the in-game browser, did it?
No.
No.
And it's all these small things that you wonder, why didn't you do that yet? Why are you not using the fact that you have a Wikipedia that's becoming extensive, and the only thing you need to do to expand the access of knowledge of individual items and phenomena in game is to create a link or a search function that if I look at wiki entries, it opens the in-game browser, browses to the wiki site, and gets you the actual identifier of that item.
Yeah, it's it's pretty stupid when you think about it.
Because if a new player somehow gets his hands on some Morphite, and they go, what the fuck is this? Then
Yeah.
being able to just right-click it and show info and go to the Wikipedia entry, see all the relevant data, and most of that will be created by players.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Again,
it's
free
definitely
developer work, right?
it's a missed trick, really, isn't it?
It, it,
But
it's
it's just yet another mistrick on the scale of things that they keep on doing.
And if you go and check some of the entries that's been put up there by CCP and also by the players, the amount of knowledge on the wiki is just crazy.
Yeah.
Why can I not reach that from in the client? That makes no sense.
Well, why isn't it linked directly? Why isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it is pretty stupid for them not to have some system to link the two, and I can't imagine it would be that difficult.
No, it would be fairly simple, the same as some sort of limited blogging function on the ETH gate.
Yeah, I mean,
Both on a corp level and on a character level, and then there's always been this discussion. Yeah, what about people that abuse it, and what about people that link porn? Yeah, they do that already.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it a reportable offense, which is also like I have a right click and I can report RMT, but I can't report abuse.
The thing is, I mean, currently people can abuse the wiki anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Currently people can abuse things like the wiki anyway. The thing is, if you could tie it somehow to your in-game character logging into it, then you effectively neutralize people abusing the wiki because everything is tied to your in-game account.
Exactly, and the fact that you would also have this, the fact that it was easy to create entries and you could easily see that it's that character that's actually manipulated this data, then you would also be able to score and potentially see who are the big Wikipedia contributors, who's actually active there. It would be a whole metagame aspect that I think someone like EVE University would go crazy about.
Yeah, well, you'd expect so.
I would pay salaries to people doing that from my own wallet because I think it's such an awesome idea.
Well, the thing is, like EVE University I mean, they've got such a massive wealth of knowledge already about the game, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
The EVE University, do they not run their own wiki and stuff like that?
Yeah, they have their own wiki and they have instructional videos that, in my personal opinion, are a lot better than anything ever created by CCP. So again,
well, yeah, I mean, it's another one of these crowdsourced efforts. They've been improved over iterations.
And
CCP just can't invest that level of time.
We've got a in-game browser that actually can play Flash, right? And they only need to set what sites are allowed.
Yeah, limited to specific.
Why not open it for YouTube? That means YouTube is going to actually conduct most of the moderation.
Yeah.
What's your problem?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Why not make it possible to sit there and watch your Seamus Donahue University professor video in the in-game browser?
Not only that, but it obviously it adds the other benefit of when people are posting YouTube links in local, you can just click them.
And that's another thing. Let's just say that it's fine that it's not able to play it in the in-game browser for security reasons. Why have they not added the same feature in the chats as you have on the front page? When you log into the client, when you click the links from developers, it links out of game browser.
Out-of-game browser, yeah.
Why can you not have that setting as a default for links in game? Why do I have to copy all and then go straight out and paste it?
Or even have it in a right-click menu. Anything would be better than having to right-click, copy, flick across, open a browser, paste.
Control, hold Control, and click a link, and it opens it in the out-of-game browser.
Yeah, well, yeah, any of the above.
And this is such a small feature that you sit there wondering, why have they not done this yet? It's such a huge impact to game appreciation.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, yeah.
That's just some of the things that you start wondering a lot about when we've been around for 10 years. Come on, give us the right things, just the small things. Don't give us new flashy shinies. Don't use fucking hundreds of hours on balancing battleship versus battle cruisers. It doesn't really matter to our experience. We were glad playing this 3 years ago. We were glad playing it 5 years ago. That's not what's really going to improve my appreciation. It's the small thing.
Yeah, make things work.
a little bit easier. The same with the PI balance. They could fix this in a second.
They are talking about taking PI out of the game.
Yeah, but they want to put it maybe on a portable device. But a solution where you just add more storage space would already resolve tons of things.
Well, yeah.
Because it's the logistic frustration that makes it such an unwanted feature, or something that's not really being used as much as it should.
Certainly unloved enemy, yeah.
Because if you could import huge stacks and then set up all your production, then it wouldn't really bother you much, right? Then it would be kind of fire and forget. But now you have to, it's this, come on, lock back in.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've already gotten the resources, so why do you care where I got them from? Why does it bother you that I got them from the market instead of actually sitting there clicking and getting them?
Yeah, someone else has done the clicking for me. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the PvP aspect. This is what's not being supported by CCP.
I think they've been focusing a lot on other aspects of the game, and there are an awful lot of areas that are unloved and untouched. That's they are taking, and I must admit, some of the recent UI changes have been quite good. I mean, the simple ability to just click and drag and move things around in menus, the ability to see where E-War is actually coming from now, the whole PvP overview stuff that's changed, those have been incredibly good. So I mean, yeah, I agree with a lot what you're saying. It's just I think that it is an unfortunately iterative process that they are going to take a while to get right.
Yeah, but I think the point is that if you had some idea of many of these small things, it would take such a little effort.
Oh no, agreed.
Point of view, that
absolutely agreed. Yeah,
really a waste not to fix that first, because the rest would just. I think most of these things are maybe a one-man job, and it's not like they don't have enough one-man people in there with great skills to do this.
Well, I think they've got an entire team dedicated to finding and fixing these little sort of niggly problems.
Yeah, they do have a team specifically for that. It's just they end up being more like bug hunters than actual feature tweakers.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that that's the case. That the system that we play in, the sandbox that we live in, is rather unfortunately got a lot of little niggly bastard bugs that cause a lot of headaches.
And it's just at least getting some of those ironed out before we enter the next decade.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see that it's definitely been a big change in the last 12 months. The change since last year is almost night and day in that regard. I think CCP have sat up and they are looking at the issues that bug the shit out of players, as opposed to, I think this is what players want next. I think this is what players want next. I think they are looking at creating spaceships for people, but beyond that, fixing these little niggly bastard things that have been bugging the shit out of everyone for years. I mean, things like fittings. I think I don't know if they were implementing it, but I mean, whoever designed the fitting system had no idea that it was going to be used by a single person in a corporation fitting 100 ships at a time, or X, Y, or Z along those lines.
And again, this brings me to the whole idea of outsourcing, right? Because now I've been raging at this for quite a while. I can create, is it 60 contracts on a personal level, but I can create 500 internally.
Internally to a corporate, yeah.
Why that way of balancing? Again, this smells like communism to me. Why do you oppose outsourcing? Right? If you could do it the other way, I was kind of enjoying this in Burnt Jeter, because I was parked up in Jeddah and I couldn't really trade much because, well, the market was a little bit dead. But there was a lot of interest in getting ganking ships. So I was sitting there just fitting ganking ships and making a huge profit on them simply by fitting them and putting them up for sales in packages of 5.
Yeah, well, I can imagine you would make a fair killing off that, given they were going through so many.
And again, in many corporations and alliances, many fits are actually public.
Well, you don't even need to look at them being public. You just need to check their kill boards, and you can see pretty much what the fits are within. Each week any change is pretty much highlighted in the kill boards, because 99% of the deaths are because of that fit or in that fit. So.
And that so if someone needed 500 Thrasher pre-fitted ships, it would be easy if there was the ability for people to sit there and actually make them, and then that would be a competition, right?
Well, it certainly would, yeah.
Ideally, you should be able to right now, because Burnt Jeddah has already been announced, semi-announced, right? Already say, okay, I need to make all these pre-fitted ships and put them up for contracts in Jeddah. So when Burnt Jeddah starts, people can just keep resupplying their ganking ships.
That'd be good. I'll tell you what would be really quite good would be to actually be able to request fully fitted ships somehow, as opposed to a ship and a group of modules.
Yeah, and this is also one of my pet problems with the when you can link fits, right? Then why not make it easier to say mail them, and you put out a bulk mailing list with the links to the fittings, and say exactly how many you needed of each.
Yeah.
You don't need an advanced new contract system. You just need to make some sort of well, you just need to flip the contract numbers so it's externally and public instead of internally favoring. Because industrialists would be happy to sit there and do something like that.
Yeah, I just can't. I know they do. I still struggle to get my head around people that love industry. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I find it so mind-numbing. My hat comes off to people that can do it, but sitting there looking at a rock in a mining ship as an example, or just sitting there counting numbers, to me, just I suppose that's what accountants do and all the rest of it.
I think this is partly because when you're doing stuff like that, you have a lot of time to do other things.
Quite probably.
The people that play Eve like that are usually, well, very often it's what they call the instigators, right? Because you can sit there and you can do administration work while you're doing industry or mining. You can chat with people, you can do all the metagame stuff while you're doing something like industry.
Without actually having to put too much stress and strain into it.
It's well, it's a practice that I've been doing a lot all the way back since launch, right? Where you sit in the belt and you just mine a lot, and then you spend your time doing recruiting and making sure that you do background checks and making sure that people are put in contact with the right people inside your corp and all these things. And you can do all that while you're basically just sitting there mining a rock.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So I think that's what many do, and then the whole out-of-game experience with doing things like podcasts or sitting there doing artwork in Photoshop and all these added functionalities that aren't really considered much from a lot of the players, I think, because they don't do it.
Well, yeah. It's difficult to appreciate how much of this stuff happens outside unless you've seen it and
done it, and that's also why now I've been trying to promote some sort of third-party salary system Because like yourself, when you sit there and you spend like, I don't know, 2 hours, 3 hours on the back end of some of the website, you're losing money.
Well, yeah, I'm not earning ISK, that's for damn sure.
So at least making sure that people appreciate the metagame more and the administration aspects, and like just pay you at least the average wage in E, right? Currently, I think the average or the low end income is between 5 and 10 million per hour, right?
I'd settle for half of that. Anything would be better than nothing.
And again, my point is, if we had something like player billing, you
Yeah.
would be able to do all the things that you have real life skills at and still be paid in it. It's frustrating to people that might need someone that's good at art or good at backend to just come in and tweak something or fix something. Let's say when my stupid WordPress is acting up, and you might be extremely good at using WordPress, and I might just need 15 minutes of you fixing it for me.
Yeah.
I would be more than happy to pay you in ISK, way above the average income. And you could bill me
Just
for
for
the
those
full
15
hour,
minutes.
even though you only use 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
I think we need more of that, because that is the natural development, because there's so much metagame now.
It would be, well, I mean, in that sense, having some kind of official method to do it would be definitely far better than the current system, which is cumbersome and, as usual, requires to be out of game and
I
searching
did
forums or whatever else.
I did the calculation in an argument I was making on the forums. I can't find the post right now, but I was actually calculating Sanders' income,
Yeah.
basing it on what it actually cost him in man hours to create that, and I was using it as an argument for getting CCP to consider some sort of, well, RMT, some sort of acknowledgement back to the people that put so many hours into to work like that. Because I was basically just saying, what's the average salary in Iceland, right? And then saying, if Sander spent, was it 100 hours? I was
Give or
just
take, yeah.
I was just multiplying it up, saying, well, this would have cost CCP this much money to create themselves,
Yeah.
allowing for the players, when they do things like that, to be somehow acknowledged in some sort of third-party service in, let's say, Aurum, that they could then at least use to buy physical things from the Eve shop. That in itself would be enough for me to say that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, something like that would be interesting to.
Even started out at only the equivalent of a tenth of the cost, right? Just to see how it actually would engage the player base to become proactive co-developers. And you pay them in something that's already got, what, 200, 300, 400% markup. So it's not like you're losing a lot.
Oh, indeed. Well, yeah.
Paying them in T-shirts and and whatnot, and all pledge. Is that fair? I think it's fair.
Well, it seems reasonable enough. It doesn't.
And it would only be fair if the system was openly available and something that everyone knew about. So the competition was even and fair. So there was no secrecy, right?
Yeah, the problem you would have with something like that, and it's something I guarantee that CCP would probably think about, is that the potential for people to abuse it.
Yeah, there's always the potential of abuse, but what I'm basically saying is that people like Cripper, people like yourself and Sander, that create so much added content,
Yeah.
should somehow be able to benefit, not necessarily in real life finance, but at least making it easier for them and cheaper for them to play.
Well,
Pay
yeah.
them in Plex. I think that would be fair.
It's reasonable, yeah.
It's not a loss for CCP. It's almost slave wage, really. As I
But I mean, if you're an officially sanctioned website, or a community fan website and stuff, I believe CCP do actually give you things like they gave us FanFest entry.
yeah.
And I believe that Xander's account is actually paid for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but the point is that it needs to be somehow easier to see. So if I go
No,
to
agreed.
your
Yeah.
website, I can see that you are already part of the website that I was talking about earlier, a
Hmm.
social community website where you can find all the the third-party participants that CCP has acknowledged, and then show how much they benefit, because lack of transparency is bad for trust.
Well, no, absolutely, and it's also a simple case of, what is the benefit to this? What if there's a benefit there, what is it? What are these people getting out of it? And it removes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does make the whole system transparent. It's
I
not
think
something CCP would make very public.
I think it would be as huge a step forward as when they introduced the CSM officially. It would be one of those. Okay, this game is really developing into something different than any other game out there.
Uh-huh.
Because right now you have sites from EVE players where you can go directly to RMT sites. I find that a bit offensive. I would not find it offensive if I knew that CCP acknowledged the site and paid directly in benefits that I could see by going to some sort of budget-like function. So I could see that crossing Zebras get 1 plex per month per active participant, which is right now 2. That would be more fair, in my opinion, than having this, well, criminal activity really running wild in the community.
Having said that, I mean, Eve is probably the least plagued game for these things, really, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty well policed compared to most games.
Exactly, and by adding more transparency, you would add a lot more player-to-player moderation and player policing, really. So it would you would hardly need internal affairs or any such efforts. Most of it would be just players making sure that the other players stay in line.
Well, yeah, that'd be. I think that'd be the ideal, wouldn't it? Have almost a player-based customer support as well.
Yeah, and that's what it would develop into, because everything would then at least be in part player control, like everything from Wikipedia entries to sharing and promoting outsourced projects and third-party things. I was pointing out to a friend of mine, I would actually like to see a Kickstarter thing by CCP. A Kickstarter for ISK.
That would be quite cool.
So if you had an intention of creating some sort of service or tool or whatever, you put it up as a Kickstarter project, and then you gain support directly by people putting ISK into it, and you got it paid out when CCP said, okay, now you have it up and running and it's ready. Here's the ISK that all these people have donated.
Well, yeah.
That would promote competition to people like you. So again, right, CCP valuing what you're doing and giving you, say, Plex or Aurum for that. If they also promoted competition, then it would be fair ground for everyone.
It'd be an interesting concept.
It would be some of those things that would just make the rest of the gaming developing community go, oh my god, what are they doing now? Crazy
Well, yeah.
Icelandic people.
That haven't been said. I mean, they've said that all along about Eve, haven't they?
Yeah, I just think what I would like is for these metagame things to be the actual entry level into Eve. So you would start seeing people join Eve because of that.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, as well, as we've already touched on, once people get into Eve and understand the game, it's a compelling game. You find it very difficult to leave.
It's the hotel, California. You can't leave.
Yeah, that's it. You can walk out the door, but you're always there.
You can check in, but you can never leave.
You can never leave. That's it. Yeah.
So, and what we've been test driving here tonight is just one of those things that it's going to bring that whole surreal aspect of the game into a whole new level, because this was not even remotely possible when we started. We were still using RRC to conduct the CSM, and it was ridiculous. We had none of the tools. It was all pre-Facebook and stuff. So it's just going to go to become the first real Second Life, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I mean, Second Life was never something that ever took off in my head.
No, but Eve has been doing that from the beginning.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It just needed all the tools that are now becoming available, and I think I was trying to promote using Skype as an office tool, basically, for my alliance before Skype really had picked up, right? We did do that, and it's just all the added benefit was something that people had not really realized yet. The fact that all your minutes are in the text. The fact that you can do things that you can't even do in a boardroom. In a boardroom, you can't really ask a question or ask for time or ask a question that's answered without taking voice, taking attention. In Skype, you have the ability to actually ask a question that's then serviced by someone else and doesn't need to get on the actual conversation.
Well, yeah, the sheer ability of just being able to have that text chat running alongside things, so people outside of the actual conversation can be addressing things, is something we use quite regularly in my business, with teleconferencing and stuff.
This is why I'm hoping that something like what we're doing now is going to become so used that we will see a CSM streamed live like this.
It'd be certainly quite cool to see, wouldn't it?
It doesn't have to be all the internal stuff, but a public boardroom meeting of the CSM and CCP would just be epic, in my opinion.
Well, Google Hangouts, you can scale that quite big, can't you? I mean, you can have loads of people watching them, can't you?
You can have as many as you want watching them. That's never going to be an issue, because that's all hosted by YouTube.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's just automatically scaled up. The only limitation now is that you can only have 10 people in the conversation at once.
is that in video, or is that video and chat, or is it?
That's video only.
So I mean, if you had people in a text chat, you presumably can have virtually unlimited there, can you?
There's already tools that makes it possible to have the comments from the Google Plus page go directly into the chat. So you basically have a full open chat, so all the people that are watching it can actually comment directly into the chat.
That's pretty cool. I think CCP have been screwing about with stations, by the way. I've been just going around this station for the last couple of minutes, and you can fly right through the gaps now. I don't remember being able to do that before. Used to just bounce off of sort of edges and stuff, but now you can actually fly right through the gaps.
Interesting.
Just a random fact. Just as I was talking away there, it was like I'm going through the gaps in stations. I don't remember those. Well, that's not letting me through.
The good old station. Jesus Christ, I've been stuck on those many times.
Well, yeah, it doesn't take much to get stuck, but yeah, like flying through the gaps.
It was terrible in the early days.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, you've come a long way since then.
You simply had to sit there and wait till you got way off out of, from the station before you could even consider warping anywhere, because otherwise you're just going to get stuck.
Yeah, you were just sitting bouncing all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes forever to get loose.
I remember when I joined. I mean, it wasn't too bad back then, but it was still you would still get occasions where you're bouncing off things and forever stuck there because you can't warp.
Yeah, all the childhood diseases, they're finally getting most of them out of there.
Yeah, it's definitely, as I said, coming a long way this last while.
Oh yeah, especially the last 2 years, which has really been effective in my opinion.
Without doubt. Right.
Anyways, I think we've been test driving this quite adequately.